I think some of the strengths that come with Dogecoin are also inherent to just how Dogecoin and what Dogecoin was originally created for. What originally was like just a meme and still kind of is a meme currency, it costs nothing to inscribe. It costs dirt to inscribe. You can inscribe all sorts of stuff and it's like, oh, that cost me 25 cents. Like, okay, thanks. I think this ability to do more things and to interact in a lot of ways without that financial risk. Bitcoin network was really congested and people were trying to mint. It was like $100 a pop and gas, stuff like that. I can't imagine that happens here. In terms of getting into it, as soon as the resources are there, financially speaking, this should be something that's accessible to just about everyone. You could create collections, all sorts of weird, wacky stuff, and not really undertake any kind of, oh man, this is going to cost me like $2,000, $3,000, which to a regular person who maybe is just getting into it and interested, and they don't have a following or they don't have a guarantee of making their money back, it's not going to be a risk essentially, as long as you can cough out like $1, right? Seriously, you could create so many of these inscriptions for literally $1.
DRC20, Doginals, Wolf wallets, Dogecoin NFTs. We're diving in today to everything Doginals. Been getting a lot of questions about it. And it seems like over the last maybe month or two, we've really seen a lot of progress, but also a lot of chaos and controversy. So I brought in here Chris from Doge Labs, who's set themselves up as to be one of the leaders in the Doginal space that runs one of the, I would say probably my favorite explorer, also just pushed out a wallet and have been really, curating content and education. So Chris, appreciate you for coming on and representing Doge Labs.
Oh man, no, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for your time and your platform.
I appreciate it. So first and foremost, it's funny that most people don't even know that Dogecoin really had NFTs. And then, of course, Dogecoin has Doginals, although it doesn't have Taproot or SegWit. And I know we're going to stay away from the technicals a little bit. So before we do dive into, everything Doginals, because it is quite a kooky kind of system, but it seems like it's formalizing a bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Doge Labs. Like what type of participation did you have in the crypto space? And then what led you to forming an entire business around Doginals?
Oh, great question. So like I said, I'm Chris. I've been working with Doge Labs here for, just about as long as we've existed, which is not all that long. I'm here with our other members. We have been working on a couple of other Web3 crypto projects starting all the way back in 2020. So we've been here for a little bit, maybe not like 2011 OGs, but as much as I wish I was one of those people, but I just love, the ethos of the space. And I think just the amount that you can create and the level of imagination you can have with products and what's being developed. I mean, if you follow anything about ordinals and they're recursive and they're building stuff off of each other and they're sharing data, it's crazy to watch this unfold. So I think what happened was a lot of us were just really captivated with Web3. We got together in a previous project and worked on that. It's still something we're working on too. So at the same time, part of the reason why we're handling things as we are is we have to make sure that both entities are, we do our best for both everything, every side. But yeah, so really happy to be here and to talk to you about, I can actually talk to you a little bit about how the not having Taproot and stuff. So in case that is one of your questions, but yeah, thank you so much.
No, yeah, it's okay. I have a fair share of knowledge about how the Doginal system operates as well. I remember when it first kind of spawned up, I think it was around like March. One of the devs, I believe his name was ApeZord, was the one that was first to the scene, creating wallets, embedding, data. I believe the limit is around 400 kilobytes or something around that. So this is why it makes...
that's about right, yeah.
And this is why it makes DRCs much more effective because it's just text files, so it's not as large. But I know since that kind of early formation in the beginning of March to today, let's say July 18th, there's been almost 2 or 3 forms of Doginals. Then there is Cardinals, right? Then the DRC20, and it's all been a kooky system. So take us through a little bit of the history, at least from when you entered the space, about kind of this kind of wild and chaotic and maybe slightly competitive nature of Doginals.
Sure. Yeah, totally fair, because almost all of our history is kind of all over the place in our very short period of time. As you alluded to and mentioned, ApeZord did come out essentially with that first sheepscription, right? And it was like a little like monkey image or whatever. And so this the whole movement kind of spawned off of obviously like the ordinals movement, right? So you have Bitcoin and you have people able to inscribe information onto individual Satoshi. Well, you have these other chains like Litecoin, like Dogecoin, which ended up being forks of Bitcoin, right? With some parameter changes, but all in all, mostly the same. What really enabled Bitcoin to do that, right, was partially like the Taproot upgrade and a couple other things that Dogecoin didn't get. And so even though we are kind of running on a slightly different technical system, it's still got the same bones. And so this idea of inscribing information onto the individual tiniest piece of a Dogecoin. And the funny thing here is you go to different sources, you'll get different names for them. We call them sheaves. There are Reddit threads back 11 years, or maybe not 11 years, but like 7-8 years that are like, they call them Koinu. There's like little snippets here or there. So, maybe up for debate on what those are called. I'll refer to them as sheaves though, the same way a sat is the smallest part of Bitcoin, Satoshi, right? We'll call these sheaves just for the sake of synchronicity. But so Apesword inscribed this first image, and then it kind of was just like, oh my God, this can happen over there. And I think that really spawned like that first kind of initial pump of like people coming into the space and trying kind of toying around. But the infrastructure, I would say, is pretty close. It was pretty close to non-existent. Now, personally, I did join a little afterwards. So if this history is just a little bit off, I apologize. But I believe Apesword was building like a wallet and/or some indexer system, and then it was like working, and then it like stopped, and then he like AFK'd or he went away or something happened, and like that solution just no longer was like tenable. But I do know he was working on something, and then it just, for some reason, one or another, I think it's because he just kind of went away and it stopped working. Didn't work. Then you spawned a couple of competing, I call them factions, and they were competing. I don't know. I mean, a little bit. They just have different ideas, right? So you had the DPAL wallet guys, Mizdev and his team, his or her team. Sorry, I don't want to assume. And then you have the Doge Wow people who ended up spawning into the Uni Elon Cardinal movement, which I'm assuming we will talk about later because this is also a pretty big piece of our short history. Those two groups each kind of had their own ideas and their own indexer systems. And these indexer systems, once again, in case you're kind of new to ordinals or whatever, it's really important because this is how we track the data on these normally fungible tokens, right? So the whole idea of your smallest Satoshis aren't usually non-fungible, right? They're usually just like a penny in your pocket. They all get mixed around. But with an indexer, you're able to track these more or less, right? All the way through who they're sending to. And therefore, when you put a little bit of data on them, you can see who owns what. So both of these groups had different indexer solutions. And these indexers would then, if you bought or if you mined or if you inscribed a token on one of these indexers, and then you looked at your wallet in the other faction's, resources, you would have a completely different collection of items. Sometimes you just would have nothing because they were tracking different things. The big problem with both of these, in our opinion, and this is obviously up for the individual to decide if it's a problem or not, is that neither of their indexers tracked from the genesis block of Dogecoin, so block 0. Ordinals starts from block 0 and goes on. It's just how part of ordinal theory was created. And it would make sense because, the whole history of the blockchain is, the whole history of the blockchain, to ignore, in our opinion, the first X amount of blocks because, Dogecoin had random rewards and there were some issues there with creating an indexer when the block rewards early on in Dogecoin were giving out different amounts, anywhere from, I think it was like from 1 Doge to like 1 million Doge you could win if you were mining. And it wasn't actually completely random, believe it or not. It's a fun fact. Some of the bigger miners were actually able to anticipate when the bigger rewards would come and they'd only mine those blocks. But aside from that, indexing that was really difficult. So neither of those two solutions started from block 0. And to us, it didn't feel like a blockchain history. Like it didn't feel like you could do this kind of inscribing process by ignoring the first arbitrary amount of blocks just because it was difficult to index them. So we came out and we were like, all right, can we do this better? And it was not easy, but we have some really smart guys on our team. I have no idea how they do it, but they figured out a way to index those random reward early blocks all the way from block 0. And then boom, we just ran our indexer from 0 to here. And our system essentially indexes the entire chain. The goal here and the reason why we think this is so important is if Doge Labs ever, merged or went away or something, somebody else could easily pick up an indexer from block 0 and all of the sheaves would still have the same inscriptions. Like we don't want an arbitrary starting point because you want to make sure that the system is universal, right? No exchange is going to come in and want an arbitrary solution for somebody who's keeping like an Excel sheet of people's assets. You need something that's just universally based on the blockchain, and that's from the start to current.
And so when you guys realized that those first 2 or 3 solutions were not indexing from the beginning, when you came into the scene, you mentioned that you'd been building for a long time. Was BRC20 in existence at the time? It was probably its early iterations, because I know, and the reason why I asked is I know when ApeSword had created that first indexer, the whole thing was all just images and people were doing mostly pixel art in the early forms of Doginals because of that like 400 range kilobyte limitation. Did Doge Labs come in with the intention to build a DRC20 ecosystem, or is it more just, hey, let's build and figure out what's the most suitable product for this Doginals ecosystem?
I know we were playing it a lot by ear really early on. The idea here being mostly, look, if Bitcoin has this kind of a system, what we can do something similar on Doge, right? I know we were ideally originally waiting for somebody else to do this indexing thing, because we didn't want to spend, there wasn't a lot of, I guess, we had to spend a lot of out-of-pocket funds to even get that first process started. So we were kind of praying like maybe somebody else will come up with a full indexer, maybe somebody else will run it, blah, 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 blah. Because, it's a lot of data you're running and the system we had to create. So what really happened was we saw it, we looked at the space, we loved what was going on with ordinals and that kind of innovation, and we looked at Doginals, or we looked at Dogecoin, and then we were like, look, this has got a lot of potential, but there's just this completely wide open window because nobody has it, in our opinion, like a real indexer, like an indexer that we think really should count. And eventually it was just like, all right, let's just do it ourselves. So at that time, I believe, I could be wrong here, but I believe that BRC20 was starting to happen. So it was kind of just, we were able to fit that all together. And if it wasn't, it was just about to happen. So, but yeah, it was mostly play it by ear, but we believe that this whole system has a lot of merit. We just need somebody to come in and index it, and all right, screw it, we'll do it ourselves.
It's funny because working at Emblem, I've generally been very early to the different ordinal ecosystems emerging on the different blockchains between, Moreno and Litecoin and Dogecoin, and then even on the POS ones like Escriptions and Polyscriptions and BNB, right? It just keeps going down the board of this different way to place arbitrary data on chain, or at least the most on chain for that specific ecosystem. Is quite interesting. But there was something random that had happened, or I guess a competitor had emerged, right? The Unilon team. And it took me a while to really figure out what was really going on here. And so this Unilon team, which created this thing called Cardinals. And for a while, I thought that was the actual Doginals. And I realized this was an ecosystem that they had kind of just created as well. Competing ideas is okay. But they used something, and maybe I might have this wrong, so clarify if you know. They are using one of the old Ethereum proof of work chains to store the data on, but using Doginal, and it has to do with that block size limitation, but also kind of the irregular block sizes that are used as rewards. And it seems like this kind of group or idea has also garnered some support, and then it seems like out of nowhere everyone kind of turned on it, and it's hard for me to really even know what's right from wrong here. So could you clarify the competing ecosystems in the Doginal Cardinal space from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely fair point. The biggest trick, let me start off by saying this. Look, I don't want to say if you're out there and you really love Cardinals for what it is, as long as you know what it is and you love it, that's perfectly fine. That's great. There's nothing wrong with having quote unquote competing factions, or there's nothing wrong with having multiple people. Personally, this is just a personal opinion, the biggest issue I have with it is we're both using the same term, not the cardinal Doginal terminology, but like the DRC20 terminology. And that ends up confusing so many of our current people trying to join the ecosystem. But if I could completely silo off the confusion that it caused for individuals, we have no problem with them whatsoever. I'm glad that there's people in this space trying to build that is core tenet number one. That's the most important thing. But yes, absolutely. So Doge Wow, yeah, they spun off into this Elon, and it's apparently DRC20 tokens, but it is being, as you mentioned, they're using some ERC20 thing, and it's not very transparent. Okay, so I don't have as much information on this as maybe as this podcast would probably like, but they are tracking the information in their own way with their own system privately. And then so if you do mint kind of these cardinals, and this is what they call them. So they call them cardinals, but they also refer to them, the tokens, as DRC20. Mm-hmm. And so we have 20 DRC20, and we call everything Doginals, because Doginals and ordinals kind of felt right to us, but at the same time, it's as confusing to us sometimes as it is, as you make it seem to probably everybody else. But so they were creating their own system, and it, like I said, it didn't start at Genesis block 0. So the biggest issue was, originally when we came in, we wanted to just, hey, everybody, you, me, Ms. Dev, let's all group together. Let's make this work as one coherent ecosystem unit. We really wanted actually somebody else to be doing this indexing work and everything. Like, we just wanted like the right solution. And there was some discussion at first between us on if this is possible. But the biggest problems were, for Elon, their system would never match up to our indexer system. So all this stuff that they had like either promised their followers, or, you know, they had started to mint or whatever, it just wasn't going to show up on like a legitimate, in our opinion, a legitimate indexer. As soon as you start from 0, you go to where they're at. Since they're started so arbitrarily and they're keeping the information so arbitrarily, it just never matched up. The big problem with DeepL and those guys was that they had Dogim, if you've ever heard that. So Dogi is like, that's like the first token that was ever minted on DRC20. That's 21 million. This is like, that's like the token, right? The Ordi is like, you know, I guess like a very counterpart you could imagine if you know BRC20. So they created a 2.1 billion tokens, something like that. Some huge supply, and it was called Dogim. It was Doggy with an M. It wasn't originally Doggy with an M, but everybody thought it was just originally Doggy. But he just created like this huge supply that happened after the original Doggy. So when you mint a token first, if somebody else mints the same token but the supply was already out, it's not part of that. It's not part of that collection anymore. So DeepL had a huge following of people who minted these doggies that aren't actually doggy, right? And that was the problem there. And so to rectify that, that's how Dogim came out. That's where the extra letter came out. And then we tried to, so they actually use our indexer right now, as far as I'm told. Okay, I don't personally make him implement it, but I'm under the understanding that they're using our indexer right now in order to, with their wallet. So, but what Cardinals did, so we were able to kind of work that out with DeepL and MizDev. What Cardinals and Elon did is they were like, no, we're going our own path. We're going our separate ways, and we're going to continue to use our indexer, our ledger system. And it is some weird mix of tracking it on Ethereum, and it allows them, because the big problem on Dogecoin, as we maybe talked about a little bit earlier, is that we don't have partial transactions, right? So the way that you're able to make a marketplace on Bitcoin right now for these ordinals is you're able to, with a UTXO system, right? You have to send, and then it does, this is probably outside the scope of what we're talking about. Anyway, without a partial transaction system, you're not able to put up like a bid and then have somebody meet and ask and then automatically transfer. We've had to come up with that ourselves. We had to invent that in order to make the marketplace work. So for everyone who's out there like, where's the marketplace? It's not just, hey man, we don't want it out there. And it's not just, hey man, we can't figure out how to like make like an Ethereum NFT marketplace. That's not the problem at all. We literally are inventing some of these mechanics from scratch in order to allow people to not have to use a third party to intermediate, which nobody wants on like a marketplace. You want to just be able to go find the bid, buy it, get your tokens. So they are using some, I assume, shoestring kind of bubblegum method of being able to make these transactions happen automatically by doing a mix of, ERC20, some kind of weird ledger system. That's the big difference. They call them cardinals, which helps because we call ours Doginals, but at the same time, when everyone says DRC20 and they mint something over there on Cardinals and they come and use our wallet because our wallet's pretty nice, or maybe they're just trying to get into this side of the space too, and they're asking, where are my assets? We have to tell them what you're minting it doesn't exist, or, to from Genesis to here, it would just be in a different location, right? You're just on a completely different sheet. So long-winded, but that's the best I could do.
That was a perfect explanation. And actually, I was one of those people in that camp that had used DeepL to mint a bunch of different coins or different DRC20s, and ultimately found out there was nothing there after a few days.
and that's not fair to the people who are pioneering this space, right? That's like our only umbrage. We don't want people to have that experience, but we can't. We tried to merge everything together to try to keep that from happening.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So from my understanding, and we'll dive in here in a second into all the infrastructure that you guys have been creating. When you go into something like Magic Eden, the Ordinals marketplace, and you're purchasing an asset, they use this backend system called PSBTs, partially signed Bitcoin transactions, as you had mentioned, right? And this is a way that it shows immediate it shows some sort of like a immediate transaction. Then there's some sort of like off-chain exchange because you don't have to go through 6 confirmations. So if I'm understanding this right, the Doge Labs team is developing basically PSDTs, partially signed Dogecoin transactions, or something of that equivalence.
Exactly. And without saying too much, it's much closer to being realized than you would think. And in fact, we've basically got it. But yeah, so the big weight between everything we've done so far and why is there no marketplace was figuring that out largely. And we're very happy with where that progress is at right now. But yeah, we had to invent that exactly.
Yeah. Well, first, congrats on that. I know how tough it is to develop new technology first, and then also to distribute it to the right type of individuals is also quite tough as well. So now diving into Doge Labs, and this was one of the main reasons why I've been following you guys, is it seems like you guys have spun up so many pieces of infrastructure. It really reminds me of kind of the beginnings of how Ordinals wallet spun up, where they started out as a wallet and then they built the Explorer, then they built the marketplace, then they built this, because you're just basically assessing the situation and it's almost like a wasteland, right? There's really no infrastructure. So you have to really be strategical in the ways that you roll this out. If I remember correctly, you guys rolled out the DRC20 Explorer first. And I believe this looks a lot better than the last time I saw it. I have to say that. So props to you here.
Good. Thank you.
Give me the 411 on how tough it was to build this Explorer. Because when I first came in, it did not look like this. I'll be completely honest.
Oh yeah, no, this was a nightmare. So exactly. Wasteland is probably the best way I've heard it put. There was just nothing. And when you start from nothing, you can't go ahead and, you can't build the Empire State Building. You got to start with like sticks and rocks and tree branches, So we were piecing this together. We were getting the indexer together. And then we needed a way, because without this kind of information, nobody knew what you could trade. This is necessary. This is absolutely necessary for like any kind of commerce to happen on Doge. So when we first put it together, yeah, we had a guy who was not only coding, but also like designing the layout and like, oh, is this information correct? And, Dogecoin has a lot of blocks that reorg themselves. So part of the problem is what's the fairest way to display this information, but also at the same time, not risk our users from having information that ended up getting reorged and now they're following fake information. But yeah, we worked really hard. We're trying to make this as user-friendly as possible because let's be real, we want to be as welcoming to the broader Doge community, and maybe they're not as technically, involved in cryptography and crypto space. So anything that we can use to make this welcoming to people, we're trying to do, but I'm glad it looks better.
It does. Yeah. So for those that are listening, and I'm on it's drc-20.org, volume for 24 hours, 12,000, 51,000 transactions, which of course there's going to be more transactions because it's like less than a penny to mint or to issue any sort of transactions. And then it shows the trending recently added. And you go down here and there's a mint and a trade function. So the trading, it's taking me to your guys' Discord.
You have to OTC, yeah.
It's all OTC, so it's ran by the Doge Labs team until you get that functional marketplace up.
Exactly. So there's a couple of different OTC desks, quote unquote OTC desks out there. Obviously, right now, without partially signed transactions, we can't do automatic trading. So therefore, if you're trading with another person, if you don't have a trusted third party to essentially escrow those funds, the first person to send takes all the risk. So right now, trade does go to our Discord. However, we're absolutely, and that's why that volume is so relatively low, I would say, right? 12,000 over 24 hours. It's not bad, but it's not great. But it's because all of that's we're doing that by hand. So we have people come to the Discord, say how much they want to make, how much they want to trade, try to find a party, agree on a price, open a support ticket, then have the support person do the transfer, and then boom, now you finally have your assets. Kind of a nightmare. So this marketplace is going to be a huge, huge benefit as soon as we're able to get this finally out.
And I've just pulled up your GitHub. It looks like there's 4 different repositories. We've gone over the DRC20 and the indexing. Wonky Ord Dogecoin says this is a fork based off of Ape Swords Ord. And then you have the Wolf wallet and the Inscription wallet. The Wolf wallet I have downloaded, I have used. It works pretty well. Take me also through that process of building a Doginals wallet, which also has an inscription service built inside of it.
So we are okay. So yes, that's the Wolf wallet was our first foray into building kind of this necessary architecture to make Doginals really, I think, hopefully thrive and work. You need a place to store your assets, see your assets, etc. As you've pulled up here, we are on the Very Woof wallet was there to kind of bide time for the real wallet to come out, which is now currently out for our Unleashed Doginals holders. It will be out to the general public as soon as Google gives us the green light. This has been, so the Very Woof wallet's only on Firefox and you have to compile it yourself. Total nightmare. This is going to be an extension. This has been submitted. We're just crossing our fingers and waiting. And this is going to work just like any other, like MetaMask essentially. What's great about this, the new Doge Labs wallet, you can see all of your Doginals. So you can see your image-based Doge NFTs. You can see your DRC20 tokens. There's no more with DRC20 when you were inscribing. So F it, we bark, that token, there was billion of them, right? When people were inscribing these, you had lots and lots of UTXO dust, and this would help. Your wallets wouldn't load. Both not only ours, but DPal's wallet wouldn't load because you had so many transactions. This congregates them. There's no more of that forever loading headache. So this is our first step into really putting in that whole ecosystem together. It's just a very simple wallet. It works just like you would want a wallet to work. And you can see all your assets. It's easy to transact. You can buy Doge straight through in there too via MoonPay. And so the Very Woof wallet is on our GitHub, but that was kind of our previous version. So this Doge Labs wallet is out now, and we're really, really excited about it.
Congrats for that. I'll be looking for that when it's public. I'm
Any day now, man. Crossing my fingers.
Yeah, I'm a fellow no coder, so assembling that to myself is going to be quite impossible unless I have a video that I could follow. I did pull up though the Unleashed Doginals that you had mentioned. Is this essentially like the official Doge Labs access pass of some sort?
Oh man, this is a battle pass on steroids. Okay, so what essentially had to happen, as I mentioned earlier, the indexer, all the stuff we were building came straight out of our pocket. We didn't have any like VC funding, any of that kind of stuff. It was just a group of people. We thought this has a lot of merit. Let's pull together some resources. Let's start to build it. The Unleashed Doginals was our way of allowing individuals early in this community to get a piece of that kind of early action insofar as we needed additional funding to get this marketplace going. Like we have an agency that's helping us too. All of the funding from this Unleashed Doginals went straight into building more of this infrastructure and faster. So our deal was, look, we're going to release this collection, these Unleashed Doginals. And by getting them, you're not only going to help support and literally build DRC20, we're going to give you immediate Doge Labs kind of ecosystem benefits. So as you can see on the screen, by owning one of these in your wallet, all marketplace fees, as soon as the marketplace is out, you get 50% off. Like boom, right off the bat. You literally helped to build it. Literally all of that funding is going into making these. And everyone's like, where's the marketplace? It's like, look, if this was at 100% minted, that marketplace would be done. We'd have more people working on it. We have as many people as we can working on it without going bankrupt in our own pocketbooks. So, but for those people, we really want them to feel, and not only feel, we've actually got a lot of stuff under the hood. I actually just got off a meeting right before this talk about 10 more pieces of I guess utility that's going to come with these Doginals, which I can kind of maybe briefly talk on a little bit. I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, 50% off discount on marketplace fees. This came with 5% discount on OTC fees per Doginal you could own. That early access to the Doge Labs wallet, our inscription service right now are both open to our Unleashed Doginals holders, but we're really, really, really trying to spin this into a full ecosystem, at least as so far as if you're in the Doge Labs ecosystem using our wallet, using our inscription service, you get benefits across the board because you're literally co-founding, this version of DRC20 with us.
And it says max 10 per address at 395 Doge. So if you bought 10, right, about 4,000 Doge, which is really what, $200 or something like that. So it's not, you guys aren't trying to rake everyone's pockets. You just need some early support to build this.
Right. And even one gives you the 50% discount on the marketplace fee. So 10 is great. We're working on ways of making the people who help support more stand out in that ecosystem. But at the same time, 0 is all you need. 1 is what we would love to see, and we're trying to give you as much benefit to this idea of, look, we're dumping it all into the work for the stuff that the ecosystem needs.
Yeah, congrats to you guys for really figuring it out and using basically everything in the toolkit to ensure that you can first provide, a lot of support to this ecosystem for infrastructure, but, also add some tokenization so that you are not going to go broke doing this, or maybe you will. You never really know at this point.
We never know.
From what I've seen in this conversation we've had so far, it seems like you guys definitely have your heads on a swivel, and your experience is definitely showing in this space. Even 3 years, building 3 years in this space is probably the equivalent of like, 10 years in the
It
tech
feels
world.
like it, man. It feels like it in my soul.
Tell me a little bit about the trends that you're seeing in this space. I have pulled up here the DRC20 standard. When you look at the Explorer, when I go back to it, right, not too much volume, although you do see FIWB that has 45,000 holders. You have Doji that's sitting at a $3.5 million market cap. Looks like it's the largest by far. Only 1,000 holders. Musk has 25,000 holders, but basically a market cap of 38,000. What type of activity are you seeing from the community? Are there any other trends from ordinals that are on the rise, or is everyone really just out here kind of just winging it?
All right, a great question. So first off, those numbers we update manually, so by hand. So they won't be always completely like to the minute up to date until we have that official marketplace that's automatically making transactions. We come in here and update kind of every so often. The biggest pieces you're seeing right now completely revolve around DRC20s, and those are the tokens. So Dogi and FIWB, those are the two biggest pieces of our current ecosystem. Dogi, once again, was like the very first token that was minted. That's like the legacy. That's the one that kind of carries the most economic weight here. FIWB was launched after that, but at the same time, it was launched with a massive supply, 1 billion, but you were only able to inscribe it at 50 at a time. So it gave a lot of people a long period, like a month, to mint these for themselves. And it was a really, really fair launch. So whereas Dogi was kind of, 21 million is not that hard. And you were able to, I think, mint like maybe 100 at a time. I didn't get any. I wish I did. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't get any. But with FIWB, it was 50 at a time, up to 1 billion. So that's why you see so many holders are there. Those, as far as I know, are completely organic. I'm sure people have multiple wallets. Don't get me wrong. I guarantee you it's not 45,000 individuals, but that's not like one guy did like 20,000 of those. Like you could see over as time was going on, like it started at like a couple hundred, and then we hit 1,000 holders, and then it hit 2,000. We were just like, what is going on? This is crazy. And so if you remember back when a couple news outlets were reporting that Doge had more transactions than Ethereum and Bitcoin combined, this was the minting of FIWB. It was straight up tight. You can even see the drop off as soon as FIWB stopped minting. You can see like a pretty, people are still minting these other projects, as you can see here, Musk, as you mentioned, and God, there's like pizza and code. I don't know some of these, right? Anyone can make these themselves, but there's still those kinds of offshoot, like maybe this will be something and projects trying to build. But those two are really, really the economic weight. The big problem right now with images is the only way you could see. So DeepL Wallet was probably, prior to Doge Labs Wallet coming out, was probably the best way to see and to work with your DRC20s, right? If you had too many transactions, like you were minting too much FIWB, then you wouldn't even be able to load the wallet. I had that problem, so I can tell you for firsthand. A lot of people had that problem. But you also couldn't see your image-based like Doge NFTs. So the problem is there isn't a way for kind of like these kind of other collections, anything if even image-based or text-based Doginals themselves, like non-DRC20s, to like really trade or transact. In fact, up to this point, the only place where you could trade or transact images, even via OTC easily, is Doog's Market. They actually have a little Excel sheet kind of geniusly put together that allows people to upload their own images and stuff. But yeah, so it was only DRC20 that was trading, because you could actually see those on DeepL and like send those. So now that we have the very Doge, you're going to be able to see your Doginals. You're going to be able to make these image collections. You're going to be able to trade these. And I think that that's going to be a big, big, big benefit to this space. And you're going to see a lot more development. So we're really trying to get those tools out for builders to create and invent.
Yeah, I do believe there has been one DRC marketplace that's popped up. I believe it's called is it Byte Labs, something like that.
Yeah, theirs is OTC too, though.
Oh, it is OTC. I actually,
100%.
I have to say, I did drill them a little bit for their 10% fee. I thought it was like quite high compared to everything else. Oh, but I thought it was an actual automated market. It's an OTC.
No, this is OTC because nobody has invented the partial transactions before, or to our knowledge, I don't know of anybody who has. Yeah, these guys are OTC. Wow. So you click on it and then you actually have to like go through in fact, it says OTC at the top left. So
yeah, I think they changed that. I don't think it was.
I think they did too. I don't think they said it originally either, but yeah.
They got some good.
It's cool though.
Yeah, they got
building stuff is always better than not building stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's competitive. Crypto's a hyper competitive place, and when something pops up, you'll generally see it. You'll generally see two competitors on that chain, and then eventually it'll trickle all the way down. Like on Ordinals yesterday, two different teams created the first, ordinal to ordinal swap and then ordinal to VRC swap tool. So I assume that's probably going to make its way down here. But I know they are utilizing, PSBTs to make that happen. So, maybe that's something that Doge Labs comes downwards on. But some other trends that are on ordinals, which I haven't seen discussed yet, and maybe add some insight. The two big ones, namespaces, right? .doge, .doji, whatever it may be, or bitmap, right? Like a Doge map. And I always poke fun at the idea that, yeah, we're going to see Lightmap, we'll see Doge map, and we'll see all of these just come all the way down. Have you heard any discussion surrounding these, or if any namespaces like .doge has popped up that is getting any traction?
Yeah. In fact, I released a Twitter poll maybe yesterday or 2 days ago asking people, aside from the marketplace, because I know that's everything, what are people most excited for between, either image-based collections coming out, Doge maps, as you said, which is a funny name, but yeah, of course, that's just the natural progression of that, or these, domains, namespaces. And it was actually a pretty even split. I do believe the domain option won out just a little bit, but for the people voting, I was pretty surprised to see how much maybe across the board people are kind of looking for things. The kicker here is, once again, we can't see, assuming, and this is our intent, that Doginal theory follows ordinal theory, where the first to mint something is the quote unquote like the real one, right? We don't have an easy way to view if something has been minted before yet, right? So as soon as it's on our list to do, and we're currently working on like 3 or 4 things at once because we understand that all of these are very important. As soon as that hits, the whole kind of like a Doge map thing or whatever, we'll be able to like then take root, because you can go and check, you can see what's available still. And now with the wallet, you'll be able to see what you actually have in your collection. That's going to be huge, because previously, unless you were using a dual wallet system where you used VeryWoof, that was our Firefox compiled yourself one, essentially. Like there, you could see your images, you could see your Doginal images, but then you had to use like DPAL essentially to like send like your like Doge or like regular Doge tokens, blah, blah, blah. So we have one solution now. Now that you can see these easily, we're hoping that once we have the system where you could see what's been minted, you can check. And obviously, once you're able to trade them, that will all start to take off. We did recently have a partnership with Star Protocol. They do domain stuff. That's pretty exciting to us. So they're investigating the best way to come over to Doge and do it. And then ultimately speaking, it's going to come down to, what does the community feel is the best way to do this? I know some domains on Bitcoin have a specific format for minting with like, a certain kind of what the metadata has to say for it to count. And other ones are just, hey, I was the first one that was .xbt, right? Like they have both. What is our community going to decide? Do we need a Doginal name service, a DNS, or are we just going to do, hey, I have .sheep. This is what's real. I'm the first one with xyz.sheep. That's really exciting for us to see how it's going to develop. We don't want to dictate because we want the community to come to the consensus and to agree. We have our own opinions, obviously, but we're kind of hoping that some of this will start to develop, with external factors and actors coming into the space. And so we're just trying to, as soon as we can, provide as much infrastructure here for that to happen as possible. And then just let's see what people like. Let's see what people take off with, because who would have thought bitmaps was even going to be a thing, right? And now look at it, like it's crazy. Same idea. So we're just hoping once that tool is out to check, it's going to be something that can then be explored.
Yep. Social consensus drives these proof of work chain ecosystems.
As it should, right?
Yeah. Up until the point until there's a very, very clear consensus. And then the teams like Doge Labs will then turn it into some sort of like technical implementation, right? And then code becomes law kind of at that point in time. Like I said, you guys' story really reminds me a lot of the Ordinals wallet team, where it's just, you just keep identifying different things and continually asking the community where their direction or what direction they want to go, and then you essentially build it. With Ordinals Wallet, when it came to namespaces, they basically said, hey, we don't want to be the dictator of this, so we're just going to allow you to basically inscribe any type of namespace, right? And that's kind of how .xbt and all these other ones came to be. Although there is a clear winner at this point, or at least a clear leader, right, of .sat. So you'll probably see something like that. The difference here is that as you increase the amount of variety in the namespaces, right, it definitely takes away from some of that speculation, which therefore decreases some of the value because, right, there's so many different options that some users, they're unsure on what to invest in or which ones to buy, which is okay. Dogecoin is a little bit of a different community compared to Bitcoin. Not as serious, a lot more playful. Not nearly. Dogecoin has a ton of holders, but I always found it quite ironic that they never really had gravitated to the kind of NFT side of it. Especially as a historical NFT person, I'd been collecting vintage, Doge Party assets from 2014, a few years ago when Doge Party had restarted. And I thought that would be, the breaking thing there. Everyone's like, oh my God, Dogecoin NFTs, and just still has not happened yet. So from your guys' perspective, have you explored Doge Party at all? I know we were on that Spaces with Dogfather where it kind of brought all the different communities together, but have you explored that ecosystem at all?
So the big kicker here is about 65% of our audience came to us from ordinals. It wasn't even just Doge people. Then about 30% are just Doge enthusiasts. The amount of pushback that some of the larger kind of, I guess, Doge personalities have against any of this kind of stuff is unfortunate, but it exists. They'll claim that it's not Dogecoin when literally you only using you pay Doge to inscribe on on the smallest unit of Doge, and then you're holding the smallest unit of Doge. Like I don't know how that's not a Dogecoin. They call it a fake Dogecoin. It's the same thing. I think a lot of it comes down to to some extent a rudimentary level of this space. I do think that it was a very good entry point for a lot of people who aren't familiar with how cryptocurrencies, this kind of stuff develops. And at the same time, the extent of their interest and or knowledge is, hey man, if Elon doesn't say it's cool, then it's not cool. That's a little bit of that's a little unfair to them maybe, but at the same time, for a large piece of that pie, it's currently how it is. It's unfortunate, but I believe that it will change eventually. We have to make it easy for people to understand what it is. We have to make it easy for people to get involved. And then I think that will change a lot of this kind of sentiment. I wouldn't be surprised if that's probably the same reason why, the stuff that you were talking about hasn't really seen as much maybe as its due process, we might expect it should. I can't say for sure, obviously, but I do believe I've just seen people come out and say, it's not Dogecoin. Whereas when you ask them, what about it isn't Dogecoin? And they just call you names, and then it's like, well, there's not a conversation there. That's fine. But
the culture, the culture wars never go away, and they exist on every chain in some capacity.
Right. That's true. That is very true.
Whether it's the maximalists that want to use it just for currency, or the NFT people who just really want to explore and build, the DeFi goers who are just going to try to extract capital but create more trading efficiencies. There's something for everybody, but there's always going to be confliction. It's funny how that always seems to pop up.
I know. I don't agree with, but I get the idea of, hey, we only want monetary premium on this asset. Not my personal take, but I understand maybe the argument behind it to some extent. The idea of, hey, that's a fake Dogecoin makes no sense to me. I can't rationalize what part of it is fake, right? You don't have to care about it, but it doesn't mean that it's evil, right? But whatever, it is what it is. And I think just as with anything, just having the resources and the time and patience and understanding to allow change to happen, you hit a critical mass point, and then all of a sudden everybody wants in, right? That's the kind of way some, early adoption kind of works. You saw how slow Bitcoin was first adopted, and then all of a sudden when people started learning about it, and I think we're still not even at that mass, that mass stage, but we're getting certainly closer and closer as you see it on the media now. Sometimes, you're on like news, like the financial news, and like one of the tickers that comes up is Bitcoin. Like, I mean, come on, 2015, 2014, you never would have thought that was going to be a thing, right? It just slowly happens. And then all of a sudden you hit a breaking point. And so we're just here to make sure that the people who want to get in and do it have the resources to, and then anybody who is interested can learn the right way, and then hopefully the rest takes its course.
Yeah, maybe we'll see Doji or Fuck It We Bark on the tickers one of these days.
Oh man, I'd love that.
So as we kind of like wrap this up, and I would like to kind of dive into this last section. I know you're not a technical person, but as you've built on ordinals, you've built on Doge, you've been in the space, what would you say are the main differences that you've seen between Bitcoin ordinals and Doge ordinals? And then what are the strengths and weaknesses that are comparative of the two?
So the very most obvious difference to us, obviously, was that we needed to build the infrastructure on Doge necessarily didn't continue to follow the developments in Bitcoin, right? So the Taproot upgrade we never got. So as a builder, that piece of it is the most frustrating because we want people to be able to transact and do all this fun stuff and swap and all this good stuff, but that doesn't exist. So for us, that's the biggest thing. I think from an external point of view, the biggest thing you would easily be able to point out is that it's just we're like 4 stages in terms of like development behind where ordinals have already gotten to, right? Like ordinals are still just blazing, like all of a sudden, like, oh, this new thing came out. No, now you can like link metadata together. So now you can use bigger file sizes and you can play games on your Satoshi, like more than just Doom. You can invent like a little jumping Mario game where you collect like coins and stuff, right? We're like 2, 3, 4 stages behind that, naturally speaking, because of when we joined, but also because in terms of building, there's only so many builders right now. So I think those would be like, to me, immediately the 2 biggest things. I think some of the strengths that come with Dogecoin are also inherent to just how Dogecoin and what Dogecoin was originally created for, right? You have this, what originally was like very much just a meme and still kind of is a meme currency. It costs nothing to inscribe. It costs dirt to inscribe. You can inscribe all sorts of stuff and it's like, oh, that cost me 25 cents. Like, okay, thanks. I got like, 1,000. It's like a tenth of a cent if I'm inscribing via like an inscription wallet, right? Like directly myself. So I think this ability to do more things and to kind of interact in a lot of ways without that financial risk of, I know when the Bitcoin network was like really, really congested and people were trying to mint, it was like $100 a pop and gas, stuff like that. Like that's just, I can't imagine that happens here, right? That would be just so much. I don't even know if it's physically possible, but it's just so, in terms of getting into it, as soon as the resources are there, financially speaking, this should be something that's accessible to just about everyone. And it should be really accessible to experiment with pretty freely. You could create collections of massive size. You can create all sorts of weird, wacky stuff and not really undertake any kind of, oh man, this is going to cost me like $2,000, $3,000, which to a regular person who maybe is just getting into it and interested and they don't have a following or they don't have any, they don't have a guarantee of making their money back. It's not going to be a risk essentially, as long as you can cough out like $1, right? Mm-hmm. Like seriously, you could create so many of these inscriptions for literally $1. So I think that's one of our biggest benefits and one of the big differences. I think as time goes on, we'll probably see slightly differently branching, maybe like a phenomenon, like in terms of like what people want or see or what becomes popular on Dogecoin. But until then, we're hoping that the ease of getting into it and once our resources are out there, it means that a lot of builders can come and experiment, maybe in the same way that you experiment on a test net, even for, maybe then moving to Bitcoin. Who knows, right? So we really would like to work in tandem with that kind of ordinals movement. We're not trying to, the Dogecoin ethos is the Dogecoin ethos, right? It's like fun, very wow, meme, kind of like what is, we're trying to keep that at the same time allow people to kind of innovate on this kind of topic. And yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the big major points I'd point out.
Yeah, meme finance. It's coming to Doge. I appreciate you guys for building. It is really awesome to see the progression that's been made. As I said, that us at Emblem, we went and explored Doginals in the very beginning in the beginning of March, and there really wasn't much there. But now it feels like you guys have really come in and shown your leadership, and you've also been very open to work with the other teams to provide your skills and experience. So awesome to see. I'm going to be following along and appreciate you for sharing the entire history, the short history, albeit, of Doginals and Doge Labs, and I look forward to seeing where you guys are by the end of the year.
Hey, Jake, thank you so much. Just as a general call out to anyone, if you're interested in Doginals, Doge, this kind of whole movement or anything, we would love, drop us a message. We would love to talk. If you need help building something, let us know. The more people we can get in here, the better it is for everyone. But other than that, thank you for your time. Like I said, this has been fantastic. Apologies for anything that maybe my knowledge isn't super, super deep on, but if in the future if somebody needs more technical knowledge, we have the dudes. I wish I had their brain. I don't, but at the same time, they're accessible as well. They're great guys. And yeah, thank you.
Hey, I'm in the same boat on my team. I'm not the dev, so I can only interpret what's told to me and try to push it back in a way that can be understood by a 4-year-old. So you did a great job today, Chris, and you guys did a great job listening. We'll see you next time.